Rebel Earth. Written by Savage Tempest. Chapter 1. Old Chicago. Waste population. 10,389. Coming to steal Serpent's territory was a mistake. Yet Dante continued on. In the shadows. His boots crunched over broken concrete as he crept forward. Dante scanned the dark housing area, then pressed his back against a crumbling wall along with Owen, Marcus, and Mila, his three captains, perhaps his only friends. The stale night air carried whispers of dirt and decades of decay. Above Dante, the hollow shells of old Chicago housing projects reached toward a starless sky, their jagged edges like broken teeth.
"Owen, I don't like this,"
Dante said, keeping his voice low.
"We're too exposed."
"Relax,"
Owen replied, though his whisper echoed too loudly in the empty courtyard.
"We've only seen 2 guards and we dodged them easily enough. Long as we stick to the shadows, we're golden."
Mila shifted beside them, her hand never far from her modified bolt gun.
Dante's right. This whole thing feels wrong.
Marcus was uncharacteristically quiet, and he looked nervous, more than usual. Guess he felt it too.
"You both need to trust me,"
Owen said, gesturing toward a half-collapsed building ahead.
"My source says there's enough pulse rifles in there to set us up for months."
Dante found that hard to believe, but they also couldn't afford to have a rival gang like the Serpents possessing such a haul. He had to check it out, despite the risk. And sneaking around in a rival gang territory was absolutely a risk. There also could be werecats lurking around. Definitely not a good mix, or a good time.
Who's your source?
Mila asked.
The local morgue collector?
"You'll thank me later."
Dante's fingers brushed the familiar grip of his pulse pistols. He never went anywhere without them, not even to bed. The pistols' weight was reassuring as they picked their way through what must have been a housing playground before the Felron invasion. 50-plus years the bloodsuckers had been occupying Earth. The aliens earned the nickname bloodsuckers since they wouldn't hesitate to drain you if you pissed them off. They crept past a twisted, rusted swing set, shadows stretching long beneath the area's few working lights. Except for the 2 guards on the outside perimeter, the place looked deserted. Owen pointed south.
"We're almost there."
About 70 feet. Harsh white light exploded across the field, transforming night into searing day. Dante's muscles locked as he threw an arm across his face, but there was no escape from the merciless beams that stripped away every shadow, every hiding place. Had to be flying drones, 4 of them most likely. Once the white spots faded and his eyes finally adjusted, Dante found himself staring down the barrels of 8 plasma rifles, held by soldiers in crisp uniforms, bearing Felron noble colors of black and gold. Their leader, a towering man with a face like carved granite, stepped forward. He was the only one not wearing a helmet.
"Which one of you bitches is Dante?"
Owen and Marcus took a synchronized step backward.
"This guy."
Owen said, pointing at Dante.
"Now where's my payment?"
Old Granite Face sneered at Owen, then tossed a small bag that landed with a metallic clink at Owen's feet.
What are you doing, Owen?
Mila's voice cracked with disbelief.
"Feeding us for the next 2 months."
Owen snickered, bending down to retrieve what had to be money. Dante's body moved on instinct. His boot caught Owen square in the rear, sending him sprawling face first. In the same fluid motion, he spun and caught Marcus with a hook to the chin that dropped him like a stone. The night erupted with the distinctive whine of plasma rifles discharging. Dante was already moving through and bolting toward the familiar embrace of darkness. His heart hammered against his ribs as he rolled behind a fallen, concrete pillar.
"After him!"
The squad leader bellowed. Okay, confirmed. They didn't want him dead. Yet. Dante exploded back into motion, legs pumping as plasma bolts sizzled past his head. Adrenaline surged through his veins, and the soldiers chased after him. A bolt struck the ground at his feet, spraying superheated concrete fragments against his legs. But Dante kept running. The entrance to the building ahead was his answer. No door, just darkness beyond a frame of broken metal. Dante lunged through it, rolling across broken tiles as more shots punched holes through the wall behind him. The darkness swallowed him whole, his eyes struggling to find even the smallest hint of light. The musty stink of mold and rat droppings assaulted his senses as he scrambled deeper into what used to be an apartment complex. Dante didn't stop moving, couldn't stop moving. His body was on autopilot, scaling a mountain of debris blocking the lobby. Broken glass splintered beneath his feet. Somewhere above, a support beam groaned. The whole structure felt heavy with menace and rotting secrets. How could Owen betray him? No time to think about that. If those soldiers caught him, his life was as good as over. He had to escape. So he ran. Up the stairs to the second floor. He needed to whittle down the enemy's numbers. The building's interior was a maze of collapsed walls and hollowed-out apartments. Perfect. Dante counted footsteps as heavy boots thundered up groaning stairs. 3 sets coming from below, 2 from above. Dante moved like smoke through the darkness, years of survival instincts guiding every step.
I can get through this.
Trusty pulse pistols out, Dante waited, willing his heart and breath to slow down. The first soldier rounded the corner too fast, too carelessly. 1 shot to the neck. 7 left, plus the squad leader with the partially removed eyebrow and chin of granite. Time to move. Dante became a ghost in the rubble, using every shadow and broken wall to hide his movements. The second soldier crashed through a door. Dante caught him with a brutal combination. A right elbow to the side of the soldier's face and a knee to the solar plexus. A single shot to the chest took him permanently out of the game. Noises. Down the hall. Damn. Overconfident buggers weren't even trying to be subtle. Sounded like they were trying to flank him from both sides. Kudos to them for picking up on his trail so quickly. Or maybe he was just getting sloppy. He briefly considered jumping from a window but didn't want to risk twisting an ankle if he could help it. Stairwell was now a no-go, so he hustled through a giant hole in the wall into an adjacent apartment.
Over there!
Dante watched in silence as 2 soldiers rushed through the hole, plasma rifles swaying back and forth against the darkness. These numbnuts likely had night vision thanks to their helmets. But as long as they didn't look up, and as long as these ceiling beams didn't snap. The darkness made it harder, but the broken windows offered at least some moonlight. Dante aimed his left pistol and fired, 4 times to be sure. The soldiers crumpled to the floor obediently. No blood, though. He should check to make sure they were dead. Shouts from not far away made him reconsider and dash out of the door. His pursuers' heavy footfalls telegraphed their position. Dante drew both pistols, rolled into the doorway, and dropped them both with direct hits to the chest.
Amateur hour.
He muttered, pushing deeper into the building's gut. A burst of plasma fire forced him into what had once been a kitchen. The granite-faced leader stood in the doorway, his rifle's targeting laser painting a red dot on Dante's chest.
Not bad for a waste rat,
The squad leader said.
but you're done running.
Dante ducked behind a rusted refrigerator as plasma rounds whizzed past him. The refrigerator metal grew hot against his back. He blind fired around its edge, forcing the leader back long enough for him to sprint for the next room. His shoulder hit rotted drywall at full speed, bursting through into empty space. Dante twisted in the air, firing twice more before gravity took hold. He crashed through a wooden awning, tumbling to his feet in the building's central courtyard. Freedom was 30 meters away. 20. 10. Dante froze. A goddamn Felron bloodsucker came out of nowhere and now was blocking his path. Well over 6 feet and thin as a breeze, the alien's gray pallor and giant non-blinking eyes along with its egg-shaped head made the smiling monster, a creature, to be reckoned with. Dante raised his pistols. How he would love to kill it. Kill every one of them. But if he failed, or was captured, instant death sentence. Instead, he sprinted toward the bloodsucker, then dropped and slid between the creature's legs as its claw-like fingers scrambled to capture him. Dante bolted away with all his strength, but something wet and cold wrapped around his ankle. He hit the ground with a smack as a second tentacle snaked toward him. The third tentacle caught him completely by surprise, lifting him like a rag doll before slamming him into the pavement with inhuman strength, knocking the wind out of him and probably cracking a rib or two. The last thing Dante saw was the bloodsucker's face, far too close to his own, its breath reeking of copper and rot. He tried to hold his breath and wiggle out of the thing's grasp. Dante thought he heard the alien laugh, but that could have been the sound of him being whipped up into the air and crashing into the pavement a second time. Chapter 2. Lord Calith Estate. Serf population, 209. Blackness faded into white haze, but the voices Dante was hearing were clear. So he kept his breathing slow, his eyes shut, and his ears open.
I'm sick of squandering my time on a piece of waste,
said a woman.
I have real work to do.
Dr. Harper,
Whispered a calm, familiar male voice.
these are Lord Calith's wishes.
You know damn well, Mustafa, it's you who put it in his mind that this piece of filth can be useful.
He can hear you.
He's awake? Oh, you're actually right.
Dante willed his body still. He wanted to learn as much from these people as he could before he actually had to interact with them. Luck, once again, was not patting him on the shoulder. The man named Mustafa spoke again.
You may open your eyes now, Dante.
Dante's eyelids felt like lead weights, but he forced them open. Harsh white light assaulted his retinas as two figures standing beside him came into focus.
The name's Ransom. Only my friends call me Dante.
The squad leader's winter blue eyes carried that same dark amusement from their fight.
You have no friends, Dante.
The truth of those words stung worse than the restraints biting into his wrists and ankles. The vertical table he was on held him spread eagle like a specimen ready for dissection. Naked except for gray-white boxer briefs. How long was he unconscious? And what did a pair of pampered serfs want from a guy like him? Square-shaped holoscreens surrounded Dante in a half-circle, each projecting cascading strings of biological data in neon blue. The room temperature was cool but not uncomfortable, and two medical drones hovered near the ceiling like mechanical insects. The drones could help a lot of people in Chicago, including his gang. Former gang. Owen's betrayal still burned fresh in his mind. Maybe he deserved whatever was coming. Surgical arrays above him hung from robotic arms. Hell, this whole setup screamed next-gen medical research facility. Only with a darker edge, like a butcher shop dressed up in chrome and holograms. Dante looked back to his two captors. The woman beside Mustafa, Dr. Harper, manipulated the data on the holoscreens with precise, carefree gestures. She looked too young and cute to be running a cold tomb like this, but the scowl she was wearing aged her a good 5 years. The squad leader cut a less impressive figure up close. His uniform showed more skin and muscles than authority, like some kind of military honey trap working the wrong side of a surf city. Still, the man managed to give him a hell of a time back in the housing projects. Best to assume the man was competent and intelligent. A sharp pain drew Dante's attention to his left forearm as a robotic arm pulled away. Beneath his skin, crystalline circuitry now pulsed in geometric lines, a biostrip barcode that seemed to swim through his flesh like liquid metal. Each pulse sent tiny electric needles through his nerves. The sight of it made his stomach turn. Not just a tattoo, but a living circuit grafted into his body.
Dirtbags.
Charming. Get this piece of waste out of my facility, and don't bring him back until he's injured.
Until he's injured, not if. Dante's stomach dropped, but he willed his desperation from his face. At least they hadn't collared him like most captured waste. Just branded him with a biostrip, though that was bad enough. No more avoiding direct tracking by the authorities or the Felron. Mustafa watched Harper's exit from the chamber with a smirk before turning back to Dante.
Good news is, your new implant is a modifiable biostrip.
What the hell does that mean?
We can change your identity anytime we want.
Disgusted, Dante shook his head.
What do you guys want?
Mustafa stepped closer, his voice dropping low.
How long have you had spirit abilities, Dante?
Dante said nothing. He wasn't going to tell this guy squat. Mustafa smiled at him, then drove his fist into Dante's gut, forcing the air from his lungs.
Your idea of foreplay?
Dante wheezed after he caught his breath.
Not at all. Foreplay would entail slicing off your fingers and feeding them to you.
Dante met the man's wintry gaze, reassessing him. Mustafa had him by an inch or so, and wasn't only dangerous. He was downright lethal. Someone he'd most likely have to kill to escape this place.
Where am I?
Answer my question first.
Dante closed his eyes, presumably in thought, before he answered.
Not quite sure what you mean by spirit power.
Mustafa sighed.
Telepathy, telekinesis, that kind of stuff.
I can't do those things.
Mustafa leaned in further, his breath hot against Dante's cheek.
But you can do other things, can't you, Dante? You don't honestly think it's skill that helped you take down 6 soldiers?
Can't help it if your boys are a bunch of amateurs and die easy.
A smile from the squad leader was the last thing Dante was expecting.
They're not dead. Shadow armor protected them from those low-grade pulse pistols of yours.
Dante shook his head, not believing the man.
My men were instructed to play dead if tagged by you. Though you did manage to send some to the infirmary with those fancy dance moves of yours.
This guy was 2 steps ahead of him. Better play complacent, for now. Dante allowed his shoulders to sag, hoping the soldier would buy it.
16. It started when I turned 16.
He met Mustafa's gaze.
Who told you about me?
Who do you think?
Owen. Always Owen. They had both grown up on the streets of old Chicago, mostly homeless. Orphans. Definitely not an easy childhood. But they always had each other's back. Until money got in the way, apparently.
Enough with the gloating. Tell me what you want from me.
Mustafa's slimy grin sent ice down Dante's spine.
Everything.
Chapter 3. Dante hid his shame behind a mask of indifference. The ravens would piss on themselves laughing if they saw the getup he was wearing. Like Mustafa, he wore a jacket that barely reached his pecs, and black pants tight enough to make a rent boy blush. Mustafa, who hadn't offered his last name or title, led the way through the most lavishly decorated hallway Dante had ever seen. The walls gleamed with inlaid precious metals, forming delicate patterns that seemed to shift in the soft amber lighting. Genuine hardwood floors, not synthoplanks, stretched ahead, each board worth more than it took to feed his entire gang of ravens for a week. Even the goddamn air tasted expensive, filtered and perfumed with something that reminded Dante of summer rain. His eyes drifted to the shock baton attached to Mustafa's right hip. The squad leader's back faced him, meaning the squad leader must feel awfully confident about his ability to fight Dante off. Or, maybe, Mustafa's just confident that he won't try to escape just yet. But Dante knew better than to try anything. Not yet, at least. Not until he knew exactly where they had taken him. They stopped at a set of wooden double doors that looked like they could withstand a pulse cannon. Mustafa pressed his thumb to a sleek biometric pad masquerading as a doorbell. The doors swung inward, without a sound. Mustafa gestured for Dante to enter first. The invitation screamed trap. But what choice did he have? Still, the urge to tell his captor to go screw himself was almost overwhelming. Mustafa raised an eyebrow, the one partly shaved through the middle, and waited. Dante stepped into the room. Darkness pressed in from all sides, broken only by a single shaft of light illuminating a floating marble dais. Dante froze. On the dais sat one of them, a Felron noble, his purple collar marking him as one of humanity's supposed high-ranking saviors. Mustafa's baton nudged his back, so Dante moved forward, his skin prickling as they approached. The alien's ghoulish gray flesh seemed to absorb the spotlight's illumination, its bulbous head grotesque in its stillness. But it was the eyes that made Dante's throat tight. Massive black saucers that never blinked, never shifted, never showing a hint of anything resembling emotion except contempt. Somewhere beneath the alien's robes, hidden tentacles waited. Mustafa halted 11 feet from the platform and executed a fluid, deep bow. Dante straightened his spine. Screw that. He wasn't bowing to the bloodsucker. Or to anyone. The baton caught Dante behind the knees before he could finish the thought. Pain shot through his legs as his knees hit the floor.
My lord,
Mustafa said.
this is Dante Ransom, our newest recruit.
Recruit. If these bastards thought they were going to pimp him out to God knows where, he'd see them all dead first. The Felron's gaze chilled him, filling Dante with self-loathing.
Why did you not attack me when you had the chance, human?
So, this was the thing that had taken him down in the projects. Dante kept his mouth shut.
The master asked you a question, Dante.
Mustafa raised his baton, but the alien lifted one gray hand, and Mustafa's weapon lowered immediately.
I am Lord Calith,
The Felron said.
and you, human, are now my property.
Dante's lips curled.
So much for the lies about the Felron abolishing slavery and human trafficking.
The creature almost looked like it wanted to smile as it continued to study him with those terrible, creepy eyes.
You want to kill me?
He said. Silence was the safest answer. So Dante kept his smart mouth closed. The alien turned to Mustafa.
He will do, Captain.
The bloodsucker flicked a gnarled hand at Mustafa as if swatting away a flea. Mustafa's winter blue eyes shifted briefly to the doors, a silent command to Dante. The man sure liked giving orders, and had no problem taking them, apparently. From Earth's conquerors. Dante felt the alien's dead eyes following him out of the room, like a dark threat clinging to him. Goddamn bloodsucker was right about one thing. Dante did want to kill him. Him. And all of his kind. Dante felt like he needed to wash and scrub himself raw after being in the room with the Felron. He hadn't seen many of them in his life before, and definitely not this close. Well, except for the time the bloodsucker kept slamming him into the pavement. He forced those thoughts down, buried them deep. Escape first. The rest was just noise. He needed to find out where here was first. Obviously outside old Chicago, but how far? So little information to go on. Well, at least he knew Mustafa's rank now. Captain. But captain of what exactly? Their footsteps reverberated through the tiled confines of an underground tunnel and transitioned from the mansion's grandeur to something entirely different. The walls morphed from wood and precious metals to white, seamless panels that pulsed with buried tech. Like the spaceship corridors Dante had once read about in an old book. His self-taught education suggested humanity had once reached for the stars, but never made it past their own solar system. The Felron, though. They'd crossed galaxies to get here. Dante pushed that thought aside. He didn't care where they came from. He just needed to know where he was.
So where are we?
Dante kept his tone casual. Mustafa glanced over his shoulder at Dante.
Your new home.
He continued leading the way, his boots tapping softly against the carpeted floor. Every step radiated smugness. The bastard knew Dante was plotting escape, and he didn't care. Mustafa led him through a maze of identical corridors, each turn deliberately measured, an obvious attempt to disorient him. But Dante's internal compass rarely failed him. Each twist and landmark locked into his mental map like coordinates in a grid.
So, you going to tell me where my new home is, or am I supposed to guess?
Mustafa stopped and turned to him.
We're on Lord Calith's estate. 55 kilometers from old Chicago.
That would be a mighty long walk. He would have to jack a car or something. They continued walking, neither of them making any further attempt at conversation. The corridor terminated at a charcoal gray metal door, an unusual contrast in the gleaming corridor. Mustafa stepped aside, obviously Dante's cue to proceed. Dante took 2 steps forward, and the door slid upward without a sound, vanishing into the frame above. Beyond lay absolute darkness. Not the kind you could adjust to, not the familiar shadows of Chicago's ruins. This was a void, engineered to swallow light whole. Dante hesitated but forced himself forward, inwardly cursing the darkness. His vision was good, but still useless, without even a hint of illumination to work with. The door slammed shut behind him, sealing Dante in nothingness. Chapter 4. Like everyone else, Miranda's attention was drawn to the latecomer. Something about him elicited a tingly sensation. Inside. An unusual feeling, certainly. Disturbing. Absolutely. And exciting. In a weird sort of way. Miranda's face remained unreadable as the young man's gaze swept past her, lingering on the other 7 recruits before moving to the massive cargo bay. Miranda guessed they were aboard one of the Felron's deep space vessels. But thanks to the aliens' portal technology, they could be anywhere in the solar system. The artificial gravity felt unnaturally perfect, almost too steady beneath her feet.
"Now that this loser's here,"
said the young man near the bay's massive atmospheric barrier,
"maybe we can get this test started."
The recruit's sharp, handsome features carried the unmistakable arrogance of someone from a high-ranking Serf family, his nose tilted as if the air itself wasn't worthy. Miranda turned her attention to the void beyond the shimmering barrier. The endless expanse of space stretched before them, scattered with distant stars and the blue-green curve of Earth below. Her heart raced, not from fear, but anticipation. 8 other recruits, all roughly her age. More young people than she'd ever been around before. And the view. Oh my God, the view. Miranda's gaze drifted back to the newcomer. Unlike the almost too pretty male recruit to her left, the newcomer carried an edge of danger. Late 20s. Maybe. Green. Cold eyes. Miranda caught herself staring and redirected her focus on the test instead. Several recruits gasped as 3 giant beads of white light punched through the bay's invisible barrier, their jagged crystalline hulls bristling with energy. The ships shot into the cargo bay, the air barely stirring in their wake. Miranda had never imagined such spaceships existed. With a heavy thud, the ships landed in perfect unison, their hatches splitting open seconds later, releasing a low, painful hiss. The platform beneath her feet shuddered. Metal scraped against metal as all 9 observation platforms began retracting slowly into the cargo bay's walls.
What the hell?
The muscular woman to Miranda's right tensed, her biceps bulging beneath her sleeves. 2 bipedal droids emerged from each ship, their wide green frames gleaming under the cargo bay's harsh lights. Each droid's head housed a single red sensor that swept across the recruits. In front of them prowled the werecats, their mutant bodies flowing with murderous grace. Part wolf, part wily mountain lion. All killer. The droids ignored them, immediately moving toward the far bulkhead, their arms transforming into cutting tools that sparked against the reinforced door. The werecats remained behind, their sulfuric yellow eyes gleaming up at Miranda and her fellow recruits. She had never seen one up close before. Each beast stood half as tall as an average-sized man, with curved fangs that extended past their lower jaws.
"We have 2 options,"
said the Asian male to Miranda's left. The thick silver chain glinting across his chest and waist made him look even prettier.
"We could wait until these platforms fully retract, then fall and get mauled by werecats, or we could stop those robots from breaching further into the ship."
Miranda agreed. Stopping the droids must be the test. The blonde recruit, stunning enough to be a hollow starlet, took a step back.
"Those werecats look hungry."
A thunderous roar echoing off the cargo bay walls emphasized her point, followed by the screech of metal as the droids continued their assault on the door. They were using lasers now. Another couple of minutes, and they would break through. Green Eyes didn't hesitate. He backed up 3 steps, then launched himself off the platform. The largest werecat immediately broke formation, muscles bunching beneath its silver-streaked fur as it charged. Green Eyes landed, in a combat stance, hands up. Ready. Transfixed, Miranda's mind churned with potential scenarios. But the answer was clear. She threw herself forward, the momentary weightlessness sending a thrill through her stomach before she landed in a roll near Green Eyes. He didn't even spare her a glance. Which didn't bother her, because why should it?
"I'll take care of the droids,"
yelled one recruit as he landed behind them. 3 obsidian cubes detached from his belt and zipped toward the robots. Drones. He could control drones with his mind. Amazing. The 3 drones converged on the nearest droid, peppering them with thin laser blasts. Miranda pivoted slightly, making herself a smaller target as the second werecat peeled off. Its massive head lowered as it stalked toward her. Up close, she could see the unnatural fusion of feline and wolf features clearly. The elongated muzzle, the too wide mouth, and razor-sharp ridges swaying back and forth on its spine. An ebony-skinned recruit landed next, his heavy impact making the deck ring. Built like a tank, he stood his ground as the third werecat circled him.
"Come on, then,"
he growled, his massive arms tense. The other recruits jumped in rapid succession, but the 3 werecats had already chosen their prey while the drones continued harassing the droids. Miranda's beast lunged at her, its claws slicing through the air and fangs gleaming. She dropped and rolled, the werecat's heavy swipe missing her by inches. Its momentum carried it right over her and straight through the bay's atmospheric barrier. Miranda sprang back up, ready for more, when movement to her left caught her attention. The second werecat circled Green Eyes while 2 droids turned from the door to engage him, their servos whirring. The beast's muscled frame coiled before it struck. It roared, baring its huge fangs, then launched itself at the recruit.
Watch out!
Miranda shouted before she could stop herself. Green Eyes didn't so much as blink, and both the werecat and droids tore through him, dissolving mid-strike into a shower of white pixels. The tank-built recruit swung at his werecat, only to have his fist pass through a shower of glittering mist.
"What the—"
Harsh white light flooded the chamber as the cargo bay dissolved, revealing smooth metal walls that gleamed coldly under the light's glare. They were inside one of the Academy's training centers, not some deep space vessel. The vast emptiness that had seemed endless moments ago was now just a 10-foot drop to a padded floor.
"A blasted hologram,"
someone shouted. Miranda's eyes locked onto the opaque observation booth mounted high on the east wall, her stomach twisted. She should have jumped first. Dr. Harper would be furious, and tonight's session would be brutal because of it. But Green Eyes had figured it out faster. He'd known the werecats and droids weren't real. She studied him with renewed interest. He was absolutely the strangest serf she'd ever met.
What the hell is going on here?
Dr. Livia Harper stormed into the control booth in all her glory, sweeping all 3 of them up in a single glare that could make a Felron flinch. Sadly for her, Diesel, Sabine, and he were accustomed to the geneticist's rampages and were totally unimpressed by this latest display. Still, they couldn't be too disrespectful. Harper was one of Calith's favorites after all. So Mustafa took one last look at the dazed recruits on the training floor below and dished up a lazy smile. Sabine and he then swiveled their seats to face Harper while Diesel stood to the side.
Why wasn't I informed about the initial testing?
Harper's white lab coat swirled around her as she advanced on them.
"Forgive us,"
Diesel said, not looking up from his datapad.
"Pretty please?"
"Yeah, forgive us."
Sabine leaned back with a smile.
"We were hoping to skip the drama today."
Harper's gaze locked onto Sabine, trailing from her face down to her boots and back up again.
So says our resident rent girl.
Sabine opened her mouth for a retort, but Mustafa cut her off.
"What can we do for you, Doctor?"
You know exactly what you can do for me.
Harper's cold brown eyes shifted to him.
Years of genetic manipulation, careful monitoring of Miranda's development, and you run a test on her without my supervision?
Bad news.
Sabine's lips curved into a smile.
The waste outperformed her.
What?
Harper hissed. Diesel, his gray eyes like a hawk, perked up.
Dante Ransom not only jumped first, he was the first to realize the werecats were holograms.
No doubt, thanks to your lousy holo programs.
Harper's words dripped with venom. Diesel's frown turned even grimmer.
Something must be wrong with your test,
Harper said, pacing the control booth.
No piece of waste could...
Or something's wrong with your pet guinea pig,
Sabine suggested, smiling. Mustafa rose from his chair before Harper could respond.
You're on, Sabine.
Sabine gave Harper her best plastic smile, then sashayed over to the lift.
Feel free to stay and watch, Doctor,
Mustafa said as he and Diesel fell in behind Sabine.
You might learn something about your pet project.
The lift's curved glass door slid open with a soft hiss, its polished interior reflecting their expressions, Sabine's anticipation, Diesel's trademark scowl, and Harper's barely contained rage. The woman was a real tiger sometimes, and he had just pulled her tail. The lift carried them down to the training floor where 9 nonplussed recruits waited. Sabine's boots rang against metal as she marched over to them, Mustafa and Diesel trailing behind.
Fall in!
Sabine bellowed. 7 recruits scrambled into a single line. Only Dante and the muscular woman, Sasha Douglas, moved with deliberate slowness. Neither looked at the other. Mustafa speculated that this was the way rival Chicago gangs behaved. Sabine stalked the recruits' line, her black leather corset and matching pants gleaming under the harsh lights.
Pathetic performance,
She hissed. She pointed at Dante.
except you.
Her gaze swept over Miranda and Trevin Brooks.
And you two? Passable. Barely.
The big man grinned, his dark eyes fixed on Sabine's chest. Mustafa almost felt sorry for the poor idiot. In one fluid motion, Sabine wrapped an arm around Trevon's neck and leaned in close. His smile grew wider until Sabine yanked him closer and drove her knee up into his groin. The recruit doubled over, wheezing. Sabine stepped back.
Anyone else need help staying focused?
Silence. The woman has skills, and a body that can stop traffic, plus a knife that will stop you dead. Sabine gestured to Diesel and him, standing 7 feet behind her.
Meet your instructors, Captain Amar.
Mustafa nodded.
And Lieutenant Radcliffe. I am Commander Cade. For the next 2 years, assuming you survive, we are your instructors, trainers, and babysitters. Complete Phase 1 of the program and you'll receive an inheritance upgrade.
Recruit Blake Carrington's hand shot up.
What's an inheritance upgrade?
Sabine smiled.
It's an excruciatingly painful process that violates and tweaks your DNA and RNA and helps you live up to your potential. If you live at all after the process.
Sabine's smile roamed over the line of recruits.
Any more stupid questions?
Sasha grunted.
If you're such hot shit, why aren't you captain?
Sabine considered for a moment, then glanced back at Mustafa, her eyes meeting his before turning back to the recruits.
Because I was young and foolish enough to let someone else win.
Chapter 5. Something was all wrong about Dante, but as they entered what looked like a classroom, Candace favored him with a smile anyway. Sasha too. Both paid her little mind, which was another unusual thing about them. Usually men fell over themselves to capture her attention. And women. Women almost always wanted to be her friend, unless she was stealing their boyfriend or spouse. More concerning, she had failed her first test. Next stop. Appetizer on a bloodsucker's lunch menu if she screwed this gig up.
Find your name and take a seat,
said the thin instructor. He wasn't really thin, but compared to the hunky captain beside him, he might as well be. The lieutenant and his fellow instructors stood in the front of the classroom behind a floating holographic console, like a firing squad waiting for the signal to act. The seats were arranged in 3 columns, 3 rows apiece, each with its own medium-sized computer console. Behind the instructors, a massive screen displayed a point system in stark white text. Advanced 300+, Intermediate 200 to 299, and so on. Candace took her assigned seat in the front row, 5 feet from the raven-haired female who had squared off against one of the holographic werecats. Lieutenant Radcliffe stepped forward, his voice clipped and precise.
Welcome to your first day of training. Over the next 24 months, you'll be tested and trained in combat tactics, infiltration techniques, data manipulation, along with several other disciplines that, should you survive, will make you valuable assets to the Calith Enclave.
The computer screen in front of Candace cast a blue glow across her hands, its surface rippling with data streams. Ooh, she couldn't wait to play with this tech.
Your individual scores,
continued Radcliffe.
We'll decide whether or not you make it through this program.
And blah, blah, blah. Candace's mind drifted back to 3 weeks ago. The Sterling job should have been perfect. She'd spent weeks planning every detail, memorizing guard rotations, mapping security systems. Her dazzling silver dress had turned heads at the Serf CEO's party. Just as intended, getting into Sterling's office had been child's play, her tools making quick work of the BioWare security protocols. But when she reached his secret vault, something felt wrong. Her fingers moved across the biometric lock with practiced precision, but instead of the satisfying click of success, she got the sound of sentinel weapons powering up behind her. Her contact had sold her out, plain and simple. Now here she was, trading 10 years hard labor for this. Candace glanced down at her gold synth skirt. Hopefully, the plan wasn't to make her a rent girl, though she couldn't blame them if they wanted to use her as a honey trap. She wouldn't like it, but could understand why they'd want to. Candace glanced over her shoulder at the guy directly behind her. Tall, dark, and stupid enough to hit on an instructor on day one. He offered what he probably thought was a charming smile. Yep, definitely an easy mark. A sudden discomfort in her stomach made her realize that someone was watching her. The Asian guy with the adorable cleft chin grinned at her, then winked, all bedroom eyes and practiced charm. She turned away, focusing on Radcliffe's endless lecture. She had no need for, or interest in, an incubus, no matter how perfectly sculpted their jawlines. She needed allies, not distractions. More importantly, she needed to win. The K-Lith Estate's security systems were good, really good, but lacked any kind of imagination. Nothing like hacking into Felron-sanctioned transport shuttles that made the mistake of flying over Raven territory. Now those were real challenges. Systems so complex they'd fry most hackers' equipment. Portal and Gravity Tech, though, Dante wasn't stupid enough to touch those. No waste hacker would. That was asking for an execution squad to kick down your door. Eyes peeled for the slightest movement. Dante moved quietly. The Academy Dome's corridor stretched before him, its chrome and star-white walls pulsing with blue lights. Overhead, crystalline lighting strips cast everything in a flattering warm glow. Guards in black and gold polymer armor patrolled the corridors, their helmets concealing everything but stern jaws. They were also armed with pulse rifles, almost as if Lord K-Lith was expecting to fight another war. Dante pressed his back against a wall, his datapad's shallow green light illuminating his fingers as he bypassed another security camera. Like the estate's security network, the guards moved in predictable patterns. According to his recruit-issued datapad, the estate's underground garage wasn't far. It took another 6 minutes to reach it. The garage's entrance yielded to a simple exploit. Truly amateur hour. The garage space opened up like a treasure vault, 3 levels deep and filled with vehicles so gorgeous that it would make street racers weep. Rows of hybrid gravity cars gleamed under pale blue lighting, their slick curves promising freedom. Better yet, it was completely empty of people. Dante forced himself to focus. Yes, it was night, and everyone should be sleeping. But that didn't mean he could just stand around here and drool. He selected a midnight blue Phantom class, its neural interface blinking with a gentle gold light. The driver's seat felt like reclining on a leather cloud. The dashboard looked like something out of a space vessel, all holographic displays and gesture controls. The biometric lock took longer to crack, but eventually surrendered with a soft beep. The engine purred to life, anti-grav generators lifting the vehicle off the ground and toward the exit. Dante gripped the steering wheel, eyes locked on the garage entrance ahead, and punched the throttle. The car surged forward. A breathless jolt of acceleration had him smiling like a fool. Once he was clear of the estate, he could figure out how to short-circuit the biostrip on his arm. Just a few more meters and... Without warning, his beautiful new car went silent and lurched to a stop. The vehicle dropped, landing struts absorbing the impact with a soft, deflating thud. Damn it. Pre-authorization was probably required. Clever. Not clever enough to stop him, though. Dante slipped out of the car with a sigh and ran to the nearest wall, doing his best to avoid the camera network's sweep patterns. A cobalt metal door wasn't far, and still no guards in sight. which was kind of strange. He would have bet that he would have to take down at least a couple of them before he could escape. The service exit led him out onto the estate grounds. The night air carried the scent of tangy engineered flowers as he sprinted from shadow to shadow across a river of manicured grass. Behind him, the mansion spires pierced the sky, and the academy dome rose like a second moon, its iridescent surface reflecting the moon's light. He couldn't get away from this place soon enough. The perimeter fence loomed ahead, 3 meters of black metal topped with sensor arrays. Its energy field created a subtle distortion in the air. As he studied possible breach points, something whirred behind him. A triangular drone swooped down from above, trapping him in a cone of purple energy. Every time he touched the field, it gave him a shock.
Thanks, Dante. I owe you one.
Dante turned around to see Mustafa striding into view, his granite face full of self-satisfied smugness.
Owe me for what?
Dante managed through gritted teeth.
My bet was that you would make it to the gates on your first escape attempt.
Something in Dante's chest deflated, though he kept his expression neutral. This was a game to these people, and he didn't know the rules. Mustafa practically swaggered over to him. Hell. Even in that stupid rent boy getup, he still looked dangerous.
No doubt you're wondering how I managed to stay 3 steps ahead of you all the time.
I wasn't.
Dante lied.
So how do I always outmaneuver you?
Mustafa's olive-skinned face gleamed with amusement.
Professional training? Formal education?
Yeah, that. And something else. The captain had spirit abilities as well. But what kind?
Punishment time.
Mustafa's winter blue eyes glittered.
Only 10 lashes for your first offense. You ready?
Dante said nothing, his mind already plotting his next escape attempt. Mustafa turned to go, but stopped all dramatic-like and turned back to Dante, mock sorrow creasing his annoyingly chiseled features.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dante. I think I forgot to tell you. There is no escape.
Chapter 6. Once again they were waiting on Dante, single-line formation. Commander Cade and Lieutenant Radcliffe inspecting and judging them by the sour look on their faces and finding their recruits wanting. Miranda could stand at parade rest for hours if the situation warranted it. However, she'd rather be training or learning. Something, anything. Commander Cade was absolutely a beautiful woman. Her leather outfit, though, looked super uncomfortable. But the woman didn't show it one bit. The commander exchanged glances with the lieutenant, who immediately turned to address the group.
Random team assignments,
Radcliffe said, gesturing to a sleek machine standing between himself and Cade. His voice was about as chilly as his scowl. Miranda and her fellow recruits exchanged furtive glances. Blake, perpetual alpha male, stepped forward before Miranda could make her move. He snatched something from the glowing machine, spun around, and smirked, sliding a thin silver wristband onto his left wrist, then returned to formation. One by one, they approached the machine, collecting wristbands in black, silver, and gold. Miranda found herself grouped with Blake and Angel. Not her first choice, but workable. Both seemed competent. Pretty Aiden Yamamoto landed with Treven and Sasha. The muscular woman might have been attractive, if not for her constant sneer and the murderous look in her eyes. Even their required skirts couldn't soften the woman's edge. Forever pale, Noah ended up with Candace. Forever blonde and stunning. Both of them pointedly ignored each other. The training center doors hissed open. Dante entered, followed by Captain Amar. Miranda kept her eyes forward, but couldn't help noticing Dante's stiff movements. Was he punished? She overheard Blake and Trevon gossiping about how the recruit was caught twice attempting to escape, which is absurd. Why would anyone throw away the opportunity to work for a Felron noble? Without being told, Dante joined Candace and Noah without a word. Commander Cade strode forward.
Time for today's first challenge. Follow me.
They marched over to a row of floating boards, each about 4.5 feet wide and shaped like a disc. Miranda's pulse quickened. Gravity boards. Only the Felron military are supposed to have these. Even seeing them up close felt illicit.
Group testing should be taken seriously,
Captain Amar said as Radcliffe tapped his datapad.
Commander Cade will demonstrate.
Cade stepped onto a gravboard, its surface rippling with blue energy as it lifted her smoothly upward. A black sphere emerged from the floor, rising until it hovered near the training center's ceiling. It pulsed once, then launched a barrage of holographic fireballs. Cade dodged the fireballs with the grace of a dancer, spinning and twirling like she was riding a wave instead of air. Miranda watched, mesmerized, as the attacks intensified in speed and number.
Watch closely,
Captain Amar said.
Don't get hit by the projectiles or lasers. Don't fall off your board. Last person standing wins points for their team.
Commander Cade continued dodging each attack with fluid grace, her board responding to subtle shifts in her body. The black sphere increased its assault, fireballs coming faster, patterns growing more complex. Still, Cade moved like she was born to it. The firing stopped abruptly, and Cade floated back down, not sweating in the least. Miranda briefly wondered if the commander had any spirit talent. She wouldn't be surprised if she did.
Take your places and get adjusted,
ordered Captain Amar, his expression fierce. From this angle, he could almost pass for Dante's brother, except his winter eyes were blue and Dante's green. Both their gazes were pretty intense, though. Miranda shook her head, annoyed that she was letting her mind wander from the task. Certainly not the way to behave if she wanted to keep her #1 class ranking. The instructors gave them a few minutes to get used to the grav boards. They were actually kind of fun when you got used to shifting your weight on each foot depending upon which way you wanted to go. Once again, Miranda was glad that her uniform included leggings, so she didn't have to worry about anyone looking up her skirt.
Practice time is over,
Lieutenant Radcliffe said, not bothering to look up from his datapad. The training center dimmed to indigo blue as Miranda and her fellow recruits took their positions. Miranda's board buzzed beneath her feet, responding to her smallest movements. The sphere and their boards now glowed with iridescent blue light, casting playful shadows across the instructors below. The sphere burst into action, spraying holographic fireballs in every direction. Trevon cursed as a fireball slapped him in the chest. His grav board immediately descended. Blake followed seconds later, his usual swagger replaced by frustrated confusion. Miranda kept her attention on the sphere and the blue fireballs chasing her. A grid of laser light suddenly materialized, creating a deadly maze between her and the remaining recruits. Miranda twisted through the shifting patterns, her enhanced reflexes making the impossible look easy. To her left, Noah shoved Dante clear of an incoming fireball, saving his teammate, but nearly losing his own balance. Angel raced up beside her.
We should disable the sphere,
he whispered across the space between them.
It'll end the test.
He was right. That could work.
Don't tell the others,
Miranda said, weaving past another barrage of blue fire. Sasha suddenly appeared beside Miranda, the other woman's face tight with determination as she smacked her grav board into Miranda's, almost knocking her off. They exchanged quick punches, their boards bobbing and weaving through the laser grid. Above them, Angel made his move toward the sphere. But Dante's team apparently had caught on. Miranda watched Dante navigate awkwardly toward the sphere while Candace got the sphere to focus its attacks on her.
As recruits,
boomed Captain Amar,
you will learn how to adapt to new challenges and unexpected situations.
Miranda was hardly listening to the captain, and Sasha was landing more blows than she was. She risked a sudden dip, causing Sasha's strike to go wide. Sasha readjusted fast enough to keep from falling, but not before a fireball caught her in the shoulder. The sphere's attacks intensified, its surface now crackling with contained energy. Angel reached it first and started patting its surface with his hands, trying to find a way to get inside. The sphere's patterns were now erratic. Aiden and Candace raced toward an oblivious Angel.
Watch out!
Miranda yelled. Angel spun around and jetted upward seconds before Candace and Aiden collided. A series of blue fireballs peppered each of them. They both scowled at each other as their grav boards automatically returned them to the floor. Angel was back with the others, too, meaning he hit the laser grid during his attempt to escape getting smashed by Aiden and Candace. Miranda found herself facing Dante alone, both of them hovering above the chaos. Man, he was cute. Their eyes locked across the space between them. Without warning, Dante gunned his gravboard straight at her, accelerating through the laser grid. Miranda's lips curved into a half smile as she drove her board forward to meet him. The distance between them shrank rapidly. 50 feet, 30, 10. At the last possible second, Miranda launched herself upward, tucking into a tight flip as Dante's board smashed into her now empty board. She rotated through the air, timing it perfectly. Her boots landed solidly on the back of Dante's board. Her stomach lurched as Dante pitched forward, falling toward the distant floor. Then he stopped. Just stopped, hanging several feet above the floor like gravity had forgotten about him. Every recruit below gaped as Dante slowly rotated upright. The instructors, their eyes hard and greedy, weren't missing a single thing.
The winners!
Radcliffe announced,
Team Silver.
Miranda, adrenaline still buzzing through her veins, lowered her gravboard softly. Her victory felt strangely empty. Her eyes drifted to Dante. Apparently, his spirit power was telekinesis. Angel and Blake congratulated her. Miranda offered a half-hearted smile. Winning was supposed to feel better than this. Chapter 7. It was anybody's guess how long Caliph would make them wait. Mustafa kept his head bowed and his knee bent, just like Harper to his right and Swanson on his left. None of them would move until the master deigned to turn away from his holoscreens and acknowledge their presence. The receiving room's deep shadows were broken only by the crimson glow of Calith's horseshoe-shaped holodisplay. Calith's gnarled fingers manipulated data streams with stilted movements as if he were in pain, not dissimilar to the way that Felrons walked. Their tentacles, however, were a different story entirely. The marble dais beneath Calith floated exactly 5 feet from the floor. The Felron's not-so-subtle reminder to Mustafa and the others that his race's power over gravity could crush all who opposed or failed them.
Rise.
They obeyed in unison. Calith's massive eyes studied each of them in turn, unblinking before settling on Harper.
Report.
Harper stepped forward, her usual arrogance tempered by deference.
My team has confirmed the data, my lord. Donaro still cannot be grown on Earth despite our best efforts.
Mustafa stifled a smile. These joint meetings usually bored him senseless, but news about Donaro, the only plant the Felron brought to Earth, always captured his attention.
The botanists and geneticists could do a much better job if the Empor-Ix would allow.
Calith's hand rose, knobbly fingers splayed. Harper's mouth snapped shut.
It is forbidden, as you well know, for humans to handle Donaro.
But it's like fighting with one hand tied behind our backs.
The woman definitely had a spine. How long she kept that spine inside her body? Well, that depended upon how many times she and Earth's other geneticists continued failing.
So you're telling me that you cannot accomplish this one small task that I have given you?
Harper's shoulders tensed.
No, my lord. I'm simply advising you that given our present constraints, Enceladus is still our best bet.
Saturn's moon is too far. Find another way.
We could have drones handle the samples,
Mustafa interjected. Harper's glare could have peeled paint, but Calith's attention shifted to him.
Interesting. Tell me more.
Send a covert team to Enceladus and retrieve samples of Donaro.
Absolutely not.
Director Swanson's voice carried the weight of his position.
Only the Felron military has access to Enceladus.
That's why I said covert team.
Mustafa had no problem slapping down Swanson or Harper. It was, after all, how the Felron designed things. More importantly, it was what Calith expected of them. Calith's tentacles shifted beneath his robes, meaning he was pleased or about to strike Mustafa dead. The robes stopped moving.
I expect an acceptable plan. by week's end.
Mustafa dipped his head respectfully as Kay Lith turned his regard on Harper.
What about your experiment, Doctor?
Harper almost smiled.
She's ranked number 1 in her class, my lord. Sadly.
Harper darted an angry glance in Mustafa's direction.
Miranda's not even close to reaching her true potential due to Captain Amar's lackluster training program.
Calith's massive eyes turned to Mustafa.
And the waist?
Ranked 6th and 7th, my lord.
Disappointing.
I have faith, my lord.
Of course you do.
Calith dismissed them with a flick of his hand as he slowly turned back to his hollow screens. As they bowed and retreated, Mustafa's mind was already working. If Sasha and Dante both washed out, the consequences would be unfortunate. For him. But that wouldn't happen. He had plans for Dante. Big plans. It was like being back in high school. You have your bullies. Candace graced Blake, Trevon, and Angel with a smile as she walked past their small table. You have your nerds. East far corner sat Miranda. Eating alone, her nose buried deep in a book. And what's high school without your outcasts? Dante sat alone. Back to the wall, of course. Candace sat her tray on his table and sat down. The man didn't even look up from his food. She half wondered if he was this dull in bed. Fortunately, Noah soon joined them. His eyes went immediately to her boobs, reassuring Candace that she wasn't losing her touch. The recruits' cafeteria was small and fully automated. Its harsh lighting was far from flattering, turning even the lasagna an unnatural shade of red. Dante kept his eyes down and his mouth full, ignoring both her and Noah. She and Noah exchanged knowing glances, but said nothing. No point pushing? Yet. Heavy footsteps approached their table. Candace looked up, noting how every head in the room turned to watch. Even Miranda lowered her book slightly. Blake and Trevon loomed over Dante, testosterone and bad intentions rolling off them in waves.
What can we do for you, boys?
Candace kept her voice honey-sweet. Trevon's massive hands slammed onto the table, causing their trays to jump. Dante's food scattered, but he didn't flinch.
You can do me later, Candy. First we want to have words with the waist here.
It's Candace.
She allowed a hint of steel to edge through her voice.
Honey.
Blake slapped Trevon's back, grinning.
The girl has spirit, Trey.
We all have spirit,
Noah said, not looking up from his sandwich.
Or haven't you dopes figured that out yet?
Blake leaned in close toward Dante's ear.
You gonna let Rent Girl and Twiggy fight your battles, Waste?
Dante's only response was another bite of lasagna. Then, faster than Candace's trained eye could follow, his fork slammed into Trevon's hand. The big man's scream shattered the cafeteria's artificial calm. Candace was moving before she fully made up her mind. Noah snatched up his tray in one fluid motion, spinning it like a deadly frisbee. It caught Blake in the throat, stopping him mid-swing. Noah swept up his chair and was about to smash it into Blake, but a chain wrapped around his left wrist. Aiden, that incubus traitor, grinned and pulled hard, causing Noah to drop the chair. Candace had her own problems. Sasha was coming at her like a freight train. The muscled woman might be big, but Candace had taken down bigger pests. She ducked under Sasha's guard, driving her knee up, while simultaneously yanking Sasha's hair. Girly? Maybe. But fighting dirty kept you alive. Blake, unfortunately, recovered inhumanly fast. He launched himself at Dante, who blocked Blake's first punch with an invisible force. Too bad the second punch caught him in the ribs. Tables scattered as they fought. Blake's enhanced combat abilities meeting Dante's raw telekinetic power. A chair hurtled across the room, barely missing Blake's head. Tables flew along with kicks and punches. For a few seconds, Candace wasn't quite sure who was fighting who. She was sure, though, that Noah and Dante were her teammates. Mess with them, and you get hurt. Noah turned everything into a weapon. Trays, utensils, even discarded food. His throws found targets with blinding accuracy, keeping Angel and Trevon at bay. One spoon even became a projectile that caught Aiden in the temple. Miranda darted through the chaos like Quicksilver, landing swift blows and disappearing before anyone could react. She dropped Angel with a low kick to the ankle, then was gone before he hit the floor. Then came the telltale hiss from the ceiling vents. Yellow gas began pouring into the room. Everyone started coughing. Candace felt dizzy. Knockout gas, probably. Damn. Lunch was going so well, too.
If you're enjoying my audiobook, consider subscribing. And if you're already a subscriber, thanks for your support.
Chapter 8. Level 20 on the treadmill for an hour is no biggie. Dr. Harper's tongue-lashing, however. Not so easy. No wonder the recruits call her Dr. Harpy behind her back. No track today. Just the boring white walls and medical drones doing most of the grunt work. Miranda's footfalls on the treadmill created a steady rhythm against the background noise of beeping sensors and muttering scientists.
What were you thinking, girl?
Dr. Harper's voice cut through Miranda's musings. The doctor's immaculate white lab coat contrasted sharply with her flushed cheeks as she jabbed at her glass datapad. Dr. Harper cut her off.
Obviously, you weren't thinking. Getting into a mob brawl. Even worse.
Harper's lips curled into a sneer.
You only managed to knock out one of the vermin.
Miranda kept running, her enhanced muscles barely registering the exertion. Her astronomy textbook sat mockingly on a nearby countertop. Tomorrow's test feeling more distant with each second of Harper's tirade. Other doctors and technicians moved like ghosts around the edges of the room, carefully avoiding Harper's blast radius.
Your combat scores are barely acceptable. Your strategic thinking results are subpar, and your adaptation rate?
Harper's fingers stabbed at her datapad.
It's like you're actively trying to disappoint me.
Sweat beaded on Miranda's forehead, fueled more by her restraint than the workout. If Harper didn't take a breath soon, she might actually burst. The mental image brought an involuntary smile to Miranda's face, which she immediately regretted. These people were trying to help her, weren't they?
What are you smiling about?
Harper's eyes narrowed to slits.
Certainly not your adaptability scores. Why, even that stupid waste Dante is doing better than you.
Miranda's hand slammed the treadmill's stop button. The belt whirred to a halt as she turned to face Harper, towering over the woman.
Dante and the other recruits aren't stupid.
The slap came fast. Genetic enhancements or not, Miranda barely saw it coming. Her cheek stung as nearby scientists suddenly found their data readings utterly fascinating. One of the medical drones actually backed away.
Don't you dare talk back to me.
Harper's voice dropped to a whisper.
After all I've done for you.
Harper's cold brown eyes bored into Miranda until she wilted.
I'm sorry.
I don't want your apologies.
Harper's words dripped acid.
I want results.
She spun toward the door, lab coat snapping behind her.
Get dressed and get out. And don't forget to drop off a blood and urine sample before you leave.
Miranda watched her go, absently rubbing her cheek. The other scientists resumed their work as if nothing had happened. But she caught their furtive glances. The same question that had haunted her for years resurfaced. Why was Dr. Harper always so mean to her?
Attention!
Commander Cade's voice sliced through the morning air like a steel blade. Dante snapped to attention like a trained puppy, just like the other recruits. He, Noah, and Candace were separated from the other two groups only by a few feet. Well, at least they were outside for a change. The lab rat routine was way past old. The academy dome loomed behind them, its pristine gold surface clashing with the freshly groomed field beneath their feet. Old Chicago, 5+ hours north of the estate. He would have to steal a vehicle along the way or it would take him over 3 months to get back. Way more than 3 months since Mustafa's goons would surely come after him. Cade's leather uniform squished softly as she paced, the golden laces of her corset catching the light. Her fellow instructors, Mustafa the sadist and dreary Lieutenant Radcliffe, stood several feet behind.
The next phase of your training.
Cade said to no one and everyone.
We'll include a handler. Each instructor will serve as your immediate supervisor, mentor, counselor, and when necessary.
Cade's plump lips morphed into a wicked smile.
Disciplinarian.
Blake's smirk was audible in his voice.
Corporal punishment?
His eyes slid toward Dante. Cade tracked Blake's gaze before responding, her midnight eyes glinting.
Corrective training for failure and insubordination will be delivered by your handler.
Cade stopped pacing.
You may now choose your handler.
A cafeteria knife sliced through the air, aiming dead center for Mustafa's face. It shuddered to a halt a hair's breadth from his nose. Several recruits gasped. Dante could imagine some of them gaping. He wanted to gape, too. Mustafa's cold blue eyes never left Dante as his lips twisted into a half-smile. With a snap of his hand, the hovering knife spun around and zoomed toward Candace's throat. Her datapad yanked free from her grip and shot up in front of her face, creating an invisible shield that cracked but still stopped the knife cold. Candace's face turned chalk white, then blushed with anger. Crap. How was he to know that Mustafa had telekinetic abilities just like him? He was supposed to dodge the knife and look stupid, not turn the tables. Candace's expression promised murder, her hands balling into fists.
Dante's team has chosen Captain Amar,
Cade declared, her midnight brown eyes swimming between amusement and disdain.
Then we want...
Trevon began.
You, Commander Cade.
Miranda cut in. Trevon growled, but Blake and Angel's approving nods made it clear that they were pleased with Miranda's choice.
Very well.
Cade shifted her attention to Trevon.
Lieutenant Radcliffe shall be your handler.
Her gaze swept the recruits.
Any questions?
Angel raised a tentative hand. A silver shuriken struck his chest with devastating speed, drawing a sharp cry and blood as 3 blades embedded themselves into his flesh.
Any other questions?
Cade's smile seemed sincere this time. Heads shook in unison, except for Dante and Sasha. Dante mentally kicked himself. That knife stunt had been a huge mistake. Mustafa's dark smile said as much. The bastard now knew that despite his apathetic posturing, Dante wouldn't let an innocent pay for his mistakes. And the captain of the guard was certain to exploit this weakness. On the plus side, if there was a plus side, he also got what he wanted. Sadist or not, he could learn from this man. It would help him figure out the best way to escape from this hellhole.
Noah. Candace. You're dismissed.
Mustafa's winter blue eyes practically sparkled.
Dante, come with me. It's obvious that you need more practice using your spirit abilities. After, some corrective training for insubordination, naturally.
Great. Another laser whipping. He could already hear Dr. Harpy's complaints while she patched him up after the beating. But pain was temporary, and Mustafa, a dead man. Chapter 9. Gift from the gods was the thought that came to mind when he saw Candace waiting outside the medical center. Dante smiled, then thought better of it. Candace was the last thing he needed. She leaned against the bleached wall exterior, blonde, blue-eyed, and effortlessly stunning. Dante willed his eyes to stay on her face. The instructors now required all female recruits to wear tiny plaid skirts, just to torture the guys, presumably. Thank the gods the uniforms were designed with shorts underneath. Otherwise, combat training would be awkward.
How are you feeling, leader man?
Candace sprang toward Dante and wrapped her arms around his neck. Everything in Dante's world narrowed to Candace's presence, her scent, her lips. He summoned what little strength remained after the whipping and removed her hands from him.
I'm not team leader.
Sure you are. Noah and I decided.
Candace studied him as he stepped to the side.
How's the back?
Fine.
Candace's eyes told Dante that she didn't believe him.
10 lashes with the laser whip. Must be rough. Dr. Harpy give you any painkillers?
Dante shook his head.
Bitch claimed that I used up my quota for the week.
Candace nodded and moved closer, destroying his personal space.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, at least she cleaned the wounds and slabbed on some anti-scarring gel.
That's only because Lord Caliph
she said, flipping her arm up like royalty.
likes the servants pretty.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty obvious. Everyone here is incredibly good-looking. Even the guards.
And which guards do you prefer?
She teased.
The ones knocked out cold.
She flashed him a lazy smile, her blonde curls catching the light. Dante's gaze drifted lower, following the curves of... Candace lifted his chin, forcing his attention back to those mesmerizing blue eyes.
You know you're crazy to keep trying to escape. We have it so good here. Better than most.
Her soft fingers traced his jawline.
Better than the streets of old Chicago, I'm sure.
The words cleared his head like ice water.
A gilded cage is still a cage.
What the hell is that supposed to mean?
Dante shrugged.
Read it in an old book somewhere.
He stepped back, but not far enough, apparently.
It's just us here, Dante.
Candace said, moving close again.
You don't have to pretend that you don't like me.
Maybe you're not my type.
Her laugh sounded like wind chimes.
I'm every guy's type.
The woman had a point, but he was on his guard now. Getting emotionally entangled with Candace or anyone else here would upset his plans. Candace continued regarding him before her hands found their way to his chest.
Thanks for saving me, by the way.
From what?
His arms betrayed him and circled her waist.
Mustafa, that knife would have ended me.
They stared at each other in comfortable silence, the medical center's sterile surroundings forgotten. Her lips brushed his, soft and tentative. The smell of vanilla and dead roses filled his senses.
You're a mystery, Dante.
Candace pulled back slightly.
You yank Mustafa's tail every chance you get. Yet you jump at the chance to grab him as our handler.
Reality crashed back as the pieces clicked. Dante stepped away.
Pheromones. You're using pheromones on me.
She leaned closer.
Is that so bad?
Dante put distance between them.
Did he put you up to this?
Who?
Don't play stupid. Mustafa put you up to this.
Candace's pretty eyes turned cruel.
You really think so little of me?
No, I think so much of him.
Then maybe you should sleep with him instead.
Dante bit back a response, his eyes tracking Noah running toward them.
Glad you're still alive, man.
Noah said as he approached.
Yeah, just don't slap me on the back.
They walked toward the fields, leaving the medical center behind. The academy's manicured grounds stretched out before them. Red maple trees, shrubbery shaped like animals. Paradise. One could hardly tell that an alien monster lay within.
We need to come up with a name for our team,
Noah said.
You're kidding.
Says Mr. Grumpy.
Candace shot Dante a look. Noah grinned, not picking up on the tension.
Trevon's team is calling themselves the Vultures. Why not just call yourself I Eat Dead People?
Noah snorted.
And Blake's team? The Raptors, please.
So what should we call ourselves?
Dante shrugged, not really caring. These people weren't his friends. Like Mustafa said, he had no friends. And he certainly couldn't trust people willing to bend a knee to a bloodsucker.
How about we call ourselves Killer Crew?
Candace stopped short and pretended to vomit.
Okay, so you come up with something better.
Noah challenged.
All right, I will. How about ghosts?
Candace's voice dripped with sweetness. She looked over at Dante and grinned.
In honor of Dante, who likes ghosting away from the academy every chance he gets.
A beep or some kind of warning would have been nice. Instead, Mustafa got Rickman flying through his door and landing on his back. Mustafa remained seated behind his mahogany desk. Two floating holo displays cast blue reflections across the desk's polished surface. Dr. Harper breezed in like she owned the place, her white lab coat pristine against his office's military beige walls.
Sir, I tried to...
Rickman stammered from the floor, his security uniform wrinkled from the impact.
Get up, man.
Mustafa kept his voice level. He wouldn't give Harper the satisfaction of seeing him upset.
Get out.
Harper hissed at Rickman. Mustafa's secretary's eyes darted between him and Harper, while sweat beaded on his forehead.
You'll do no such thing,
Mustafa said.
I need a witness just in case the good doctor accuses me of slapping that smirk off her face.
Harper laughed.
And here I thought you preferred whips.
Her gaze swept over Mustafa's office, lingering on the ancient weapons mounted on his trophy wall before returning to him.
You don't look very busy.
Mustafa ignored the accusation.
What can I do for you, Doctor?
I want Miranda leading one of the recruit squads.
Harper speared Mustafa with her cold stare.
Your cadre needs to make it happen.
Mustafa lifted his drink, letting the aged whiskey roll across his tongue before answering.
And why would I do that?
Don't play stupid, Mustafa. Miranda is obviously the smartest and best recruit fighter you have.
Mustafa studied the geneticist with the patience of a career soldier, noting every micro-expression, every tell. The woman was good, he'd give her that. But she'd never served in the wasteland wars, never learned how real power worked.
Even if that were true,
Mustafa said gently,
that hardly qualifies your protege as a leader.
Bullshit.
Perhaps.
The corner of his mouth edged up enough to show a hint of teeth.
But the recruits must still choose a leader. For themselves.
Don't be that way, Mustafa.
Harper's voice softened, signaling a different approach. Mustafa reclined in his chair, the smart fabric conforming to his spine.
Do you have anything to offer in exchange?
For what? I already fix up your waste filth 7 times a week.
You could have a real doctor treat him. Even a medical drone would do.
Well, since I'm not a real doctor,
Harper purred,
I wouldn't dream of missing the opportunity to rub salt into your pet's wounds.
Her eyes narrowed.
Surely you don't think Waste could make a good team leader?
Mustafa said nothing and waited for her next move. Rickman, the idiot, wasn't missing anything, though he tried to hide it.
Exactly what game are you playing, Mustafa?
One that I intend to win. Doctor.
I could petition Lord Caliph.
Mustafa shrugged, doubtful the master would take her side on this matter. Harper must have realized this too. Her honey-brown eyes promised payback before she gave him her back and practically stomped out of his office.
Sir, I'm so sorry,
Get out of here. You're relieved of duty. Permanently.
Mustafa watched his former secretary scramble away. Pity. The man had a knack for logistics and scheduling. But anyone who couldn't keep out a tiny scientist had no place in his chain of command. Besides, he needed someone who could handle what was coming next. He turned to his office's sole window and watched the recruits train in the distance. Dante was down there somewhere, most likely plotting his next escape attempt. The boy had no idea what he was actually being trained for. None of them did. But they would learn soon enough, if they survived. Chapter 10. Old Chicago, waste population, 10,387, present Serf. Population 4, 2 months later. This wasn't Dante's first ride in one of Lord Calith's vintage grav cars, but it would most likely be his last. The M5's anti-grav generators purred as Mustafa guided them 2 blocks from Monster Silk's headquarters. With a ride like this, it wouldn't take his rival gang long to make a move. Through the windshield, old Chicago's broken skyline loomed like rotting teeth against the autumn night sky. Dante rode shotgun. Mustafa wasn't foolish enough to let him anywhere near his back for long periods of time. In the rearview mirror, Noah and Candace sat silent, scanning the deserted street. If they were nervous, they didn't show it. Only gangs, addicts, and werecats dared roam the night. Mustafa stopped 2 blocks away from Silk's block and handed them each a pulse pistol.
Get going.
No sooner had they slipped out of the car, Mustafa motioned Dante over to the driver's window.
Destroy their jamming and computer equipment. You have 25 minutes. Then, I leave.
Suicide, really. Waltzing into enemy territory with the intent to do harm. But maybe, just maybe, this was his best shot at freedom. Dante bent down, an honest smile spreading across his lips as he leveled his new pulse pistol at Mustafa's face.
How many?
Mustafa's eyes drifted from the barrel to Dante's face with forced boredom.
2.
Where?
The roof, a block down. East and west side.
Thanks for everything, Mustafa.
Dante squeezed the trigger twice. The pistol clicked, empty. Mustafa smiled up at him from the driver's seat.
You now have 23 minutes.
Dante took a deep breath, wrestling his rage into submission.
One day, I will be better than you, Mustafa.
But I'll always be smarter.
Mustafa's fingers tapped the steering controls.
Now get going. And make certain Candace remains relatively undamaged.
He might as well have added, or else. Apparently, the Caliph Enclave also intended to use Candace as a honey trap. Dante jogged to catch up with the others, concrete crumbling under his boots. Noah held up his useless weapon.
No charges.
I know.
He should have checked before he shot Mustafa. Dante kept his eyes peeled as he sucked in the city's rancid air, which was definitely one thing he didn't miss about this place.
We keep to the plan, but secure us some weapons as soon as we can. Candace...
She turned, moonlight catching the soft curves of her face.
Your main job is to distract Monster Silk's goons and find an exfil for evac.
I can fight, you know.
Yes, I know.
Monster Silk's headquarters soon rose before them, a crumbling husk of an old municipal building, stripped of all purpose but menace. Barred windows reflected amber biolights, while addicts and dealers shuffled through the entrance like dying moths. A tall, muscled guard with a mohawk sharp enough to gut you blocked their path. Her gray eyes lingered on Candace, who waved at her with dancing fingers. Mohawk glanced at Dante, no doubt rightly guessing that he was wearing night vision shades. It also hid his identity in case someone recognized him. Noah, dressed in an expensive blue suit and gold rings, stood arm in arm with Candace, who wore a metallic white dress that shimmered with every step. Together, they looked like the picture-perfect surf power couple. Having Dante as muscle suggested that Noah was smart enough to be a repeat customer, so hopefully these sentries wouldn't shank them. Mohawk made a decision and nodded at her partner. He frisked them, confiscating their dead weapons. When he demanded payment, Noah flashed credit chips like he was born to waste them.
Blue ice. First, if you don't mind.
Greed lit the guard's eyes. Blue ice was an expensive drug. Mohawk whistled, summoning another gang member to escort them inside. The lobby assaulted Dante's senses. Sweat-stained couches held the unconscious, and the desperate while makeshift stalls hawked chemical oblivion. The Ravens stayed away from the drug trade. But if he were honest with himself, his gang dealt in destroying plenty of lives too. Damn. What a time to grow a conscience. Dante leaned in close to Noah.
Weapons cache, second floor, probably.
Noah waved him off, playing his role of entitled rich boy to perfection. They soon hit another checkpoint at the stairwell. The guard there wanted an additional processing fee. Candace leaned in close, all smiles until her blade kissed the man's belly. His smile died as he stepped aside.
Bitch!
He muttered. They paid him no mind and proceeded up the steps.
Where'd you get the knife?
Dante whispered as they climbed the steps.
Take me on a real date, maybe you'll find out.
No time for a room, kids.
Noah tapped his wrist display.
16 minutes left.
The second floor reeked of blue ice and broken dreams. Their guide went down quick and quietly, seconds after they entered the floor. Noah liberated a pulse gun from the man and tossed his once hidden knife to Dante. Dante turned to Candace.
Dump him and find an exfil for us.
Candace frowned at the order but bent down and grabbed their former guide by the shoulders in an unsteady fireman's carry, pulling him out of the stairwell and vanishing on the second floor. Without running, Noah and Dante hurried up the dark staircase.
This is suicide, you know?
Noah muttered.
Suicide is returning to the Enclave without completing the mission.
When they reached the third floor, a thinly muscled guard with a nose ring stopped them while his partner raised his pulse rifle in their direction. Dante's telekinetic blast caught the first guard in the chest, smashing him against the wall. The second guard managed half a gurgle before Noah's stolen knife opened his throat. The weapons expert was right. This was suicide. And, God help him, a real rush. Dante checked his wristband. 14 minutes left. Hell, they no longer had time for stealth. Leaving the bodies in the middle of the staircase, Dante sprinted to the 4th floor, Noah close behind. Hopefully, Monster Silk's operations hub would be on this floor. The top floor was where his old gang housed theirs. The 4th floor stretched before them in near darkness, broken only by the glow of electric blue bioscones fixed intermittently on the walls. Not a problem with his night vision shades. Noah now had his on too. Spray-painted Monster Silk silver logos watched their every move. Dante took point, newly acquired pulse rifle ready. The first room, empty. Furniture covered in dust. Noah kicked the second door in on the left, then fired pulse rounds into the room. Screams from the lower floors. The Silks would be coming after them soon. They kept going. 3 more doors, 3 more dead ends. This was taking too long. Time was bleeding away with each second. And where the hell was Candace? They couldn't leave her even if he wanted to. A pile of gang members burst out of the next door seconds before they reached it and started firing at him and Noah. Dante channeled his power the way Mustafa had taught him, ripping a metal door from its frame and sending it spinning through the hallway like a blade. Screams and wet impacts followed. His head throbbed, blood threatening to leak from his nose, but this was no time for weakness. More gang members poured from a side room, so they greeted them with a hail of pulse bolts, turning living flesh to waste. Waste, just like he was. Only now, he was wrapped up in borrowed Serf skin. Feel guilty later. Finish the job. A noise from behind. A dark figure leapt at them. Noah spun around and slapped her with the butt of his rifle, then joined Dante as he rushed down the hall. Monster Silk headquarters had now descended into blind chaos. Even from here, Dante could hear the thunder of boots climbing the staircase. At the hallway's end, reinforced doors marked their target. The operations hub. Should be more resistance, more guards. But Monster Silk had a rep for being sloppy, and Dante would take every shred of luck he could get. With a thought, Dante blasted the knob from the door and hurried inside, then froze. Miranda, shocked and worried, stared at them from the computer station.
What are you guys doing here?
Dante's head suddenly felt like it wanted to explode. This didn't make sense. Why would Miranda be... 2 shots cracked through the crowded space. Noah went down with a grunt, and pain exploded in Dante's side as his legs gave out. He hit the floor hard, blood pooling beneath him. When he looked up, Miranda was gone. A terrified gang member cowered at the controls, and Sasha now stood over them, hatred burning in her eyes.
Guess my little illusion fooled you, traitor!
She aimed her pistol at Dante's face.
And now you really do get to escape. Just not the way you wanted.
Sasha's head exploded. Dante watched, stunned, as his fellow recruit folded like a puppet and collapsed onto Noah. The gang member at the computer comms reached for his gun and found 2 bullets in his throat. Candace, gun barrel smoking and blood speckling her perfect outfit, smiled down at Dante.
Told you I could fight.
Dante grimaced a smile as he slowly got to his feet, flesh wound on his left side. Thank the gods Sasha didn't have nightshades, or she would have blown a hole clear through him.
Get this heavy bitch off me,
Noah groaned, blood seeping from his wounded shoulder. Candace bent down to help him, not letting go of her new pistol. Dante scanned the small room. Amateurs they might be. Monster Silk had some pretty sweet tech for a waste gang. Metal shelving stretched from one wall to another, packed with both new and old computers, high-def monitors, and plenty of other stolen Serf gear. Quantum processors hummed a steady beat, their cooling systems battling the heat from 1,000 illicit transactions. Just like him and his old gang. Damn. Owen's betrayal still hurt, and Mila and Marcus's too.
5 minutes,
Noah growled, taking up position by the door.
Great. Let's do it.
Dante and Candace opened fire simultaneously, blasting the computers and comms equipment with a barrage of pulse rounds. In a few seconds, it was over. The small room now smelled of fried circuits and burned meat. Alarms started to shriek, shattering their timeline. Dante could hear heavy boots thundering down the hallway. Noah tied his handkerchief across his nose and mouth, then tossed a smoke grenade into the hallway. Unlike Noah, Dante had to set his rifle down in order to get his handkerchief on.
Which way?
Noah asked Candace as he passed her spare shades and a handkerchief. Candace joined him at the door.
Up.
The roof?
Noah's voice cracked.
You gotta be kidding me.
Candace slid her shades on.
Maybe there's a fire escape?
Maybe, Dante thought to himself. If there wasn't, they were dead. Noah kicked open the door. They ran, lungs bleeding fire as they plowed past stumbling Silks, who were blinded by the smoke. Finally, they made it to the stairwell. Noah sprayed the lower stairs with pulse fire. His wounded shoulder hampered his accuracy. But then again, the point was to buy them time. But the shouts and pounding boots kept coming, so they kept running. They burst onto the roof, cold night air biting as gunfire echoed behind them. Dante made it to the edge of the building first, of course. There was no fire escape. He looked over at Candace, who shrugged and pointed to an adjacent building.
We're pretty close. We can make it.
Yeah, close like a mile,
muttered Noah. Pulse rounds sizzled past their heads as Monster Silk's gang poured onto the roof behind them.
7 meters,
Candace called out. Without hesitation, she backed up several feet, then sprinted for the edge and launched herself into the night. Her boots hit the opposite ledge with barely an inch to spare. She tucked into a roll and sprang up into a guarded crouch. Pretty damn good, especially in a designer skirt. Dante repeated Candace's action, backing up. His leg screamed in protest as he half limped, half ran toward the building's edge. Blood pulsed from his wound with each step, leaving a trail of dark droplets. Not enough strength, not enough time. He reached for his power, feeling it respond sluggishly through his haze of pain. The familiar pressure built behind his eyes as he did his best to gain momentum. He jumped and fell. Candace and Noah shouted for him. He shot back up into the air, reaching for the building. His chest slammed into the ledge, knocking the air from his lungs. Candace dragged him up as pulse fire turned the night air into green hell around them. Gasping for breath, Dante rolled over to see his teammate still stuck on the other building.
Noah, now!
Uncertainty marring his face, Noah charged forward, his wounded shoulder throwing off his balance. He leaped, but Dante saw it immediately. He wasn't going to make it. Noah's eyes went wide as he realized the same thing, his fingers falling short of the ledge. Dante's power lashed out crude and desperate. Blood dripped from his nose as he seized Noah with his so-called spirit power. His teammate's scream echoed off the building as he plummeted, then turned into a grunt of pain as Dante's power yanked him upward. Every muscle in Dante's body trembled with the effort. His vision tunneled, and darkness started to creep in around the edges. Don't drop him, don't drop him, don't... With one final surge, Dante pulled Noah onto the roof. The three of them lay there gasping as pulse rounds chewed into the concrete around them. Candace stuck her head over the ledge.
Movement below.
Through blurred vision, Dante saw Monster Silk's crew flooding into the building beneath them. The rooftop would soon be overrun with angry Monster Silk gang members itching for payback. Candace glanced at her wristband.
2 minutes before Mustafa leaves us.
They weren't going to make it, but he had one last card to play. Dante pushed himself to his knees, blood still dripping from his nose. He gathered what remained of his fading strength, the power feeling like molten lead inside his skull, and wrapped it around all three of them.
Hold on.
Dante gasped as he latched his arms around Noah and Candace.
What are you...
Noah's question turned into a scream as Dante hurled them over the roof's edge. The world spun violently as they plummeted, his power slowing their descent just enough to keep bones from shattering as they splattered onto the alley below. Dante couldn't move, but felt rough hands pull him to his feet. Cursing through clenched teeth, Noah positioned Dante between Candace and himself. Dante's leg nearly buckled, but Candace caught him. Above, voices shouted coordinates and snarled threats. They ran through the maze of alleys, each step an exercise in agony for Dante, praying they'd reach the rendezvous point before Mustafa's patience, or their luck, ran out. A block away, they spotted him. Mustafa leaning against the sport red grav car, tapping his wristband at them as Monster Silk's crew closed in.
This might be a good time to call in your snipers.
Dante gasped, still running with the help of Noah and Candace.
What snipers?
A bluff. There were never any snipers. He could have ran for it before this entire debacle began. Maybe Mustafa was right. He'd never be as smart as him. The four of them piled into the grav car, monster silk pulse rounds hammering against the vehicle's armored hull as Mustafa gunned the engines. The irony wasn't lost on Dante as old Chicago fell away into the night. Instead of escaping to his old home, now he was running away from it. Chapter 11. Dr. Livia Harper looked down at Mustafa with a warm, clinical grin. He wondered what she wanted, besides putting her experiment in charge. The medical chamber's sterile white walls reflected the blue-tinged light from the ceiling's swirling apex. Antiseptic scents mingled with human sweat. A monitoring device beeped steadily in the corner. Mustafa ignored them all and gazed up into Livia's lovely brown eyes. The geneticist adjusted the white sheet wrapped around her as she straddled him on the narrow medical bed. Teasing him. It was working.
Okay, let's hear it,
Mustafa said, adjusting his hips. Livia shifted and snuggled against him, her breath warm against his neck.
Hear what?
He gave her a quick peck on the lips.
Out with it. I'm never going to be more compromised than I am right now. Better ask before one of your staffers shows up.
They wouldn't dare,
Livia giggled.
Besides, I locked the door.
He stroked her cheek, waiting. Silence settled between them, comfortable yet fragile.
All right.
Livia eventually sighed.
I can tell that you're curious.
She propped her head up on her elbow.
I think that I should go on the Saturn mission.
Mustafa tensed, sitting up despite the bed's confined space.
That's top secret. How did you find out about it?
That's top secret,
Livia mocked, her eyes sparkling with smug satisfaction. A look he no doubt gave her hundreds of times. Mustafa shook his head, a resigned smile playing on his lips.
You know, that's the trouble with dating super smart women.
Which is?
They're super smart.
They shared a smile. Just as quickly, Mustafa's expression hardened.
Sorry. You can't go. K-Lith would have my head, if anything were to happen to you.
So it's not the possibility of me getting hurt that bothers you.
Her voice carried a hint of challenge.
Well, that would hurt too.
He met her gaze.
But not as much as K-Lith chopping off my head or sucking the life from me.
Livia sat up.
Must you always be such an asshole?
Not an asshole this time. Merely acting as the captain of the guard.
He paused, considering his next words carefully.
Why not train Miranda to collect samples for you? She's smart enough.
Livia's face tightened with displeasure.
The girl's barely able to rank number 1 in her class.
Don't you like her at all?
Livia snorted.
Do you like Dante?
It was a fair question, and in a way, he did like the recruit. But he wouldn't tell Livia that. Too dangerous. He wouldn't tell anybody, especially Dante.
You know,
Livia continued, her voice softening.
In a way, he reminds me of you.
Stubborn?
Mustafa leaned back on the bed, pulling Livia with him.
And he does have a cute little butt.
Doctor?
He feigned shock all the while smiling.
Don't worry, Muse. Not like I'm going to sleep with him or anything. He's waste, after all.
Like that would stop her. Mustafa didn't doubt for a second that Livia would do whatever it took to get what she wanted. Even sleep with someone like Dante. He kept that thought to himself, however, and pulled Dr. Livia Harper closer. All too aware of the dangerous game they were both playing. Candace took a swig of synth orange juice and watched Dante approach their table with his tray. The Enclave's med team was good. Only 2 days since being shot, and he was barely limping. That fool Blake was holding court with his team at a table near the food dispenser. Trevon was with them. Tall, dark, and all beefy muscles. He might have been a lot of fun. Yeah, he still looked at her. But the resentment in those dark eyes was there, ever since he found out that she killed Sasha. The cafeteria's filtered air carried the bland scent of protein paste and microwaved vegetables. Recessed lighting panels cast an even, artificial glow across the boring white walls and newly bolted-down tables. Dante set his tray down with a soft clatter and slid onto the bench opposite Candace. They ate in silence, the scrape of utensils against trays filling the space between them.
How are you doing?
Dante finally asked. Small talk. She could manage that. She was the damn goddess of small talk after all. Boring, yes, but class would be starting soon enough.
Feeling good, you?
Okay.
He was lying, but she let it slide. Since their first mission, something in him had changed. He hadn't even tried to escape once. Possibly, he was waiting for his leg to heal. No, it was more than that. It couldn't be the killing. As a waste gang leader, he must have done plenty of killing before, unlike her. Sasha had been her first murder, and surprisingly, she felt nothing. The bitch had been about to kill Dante and Noah, along with nearly wrecking the entire mission. Across the room, Miranda caught her eye. They exchanged slight nods. Just two girls left now. Less competition, though it would have been nice if one of the boys had bid it instead. Dante's next question caught her off guard.
Did you tell anyone about our mission?
Candace stopped chewing, giving him a sharp look.
Before we went,
he clarified. Candace shook her head.
No point.
Then it must have been Noah.
As if summoned, Noah burst into the recruits-only cafeteria, his boots squeaking against the floor. He grabbed 2 protein shakes from the self-service counter and bounced over, all grins.
Fellow winners, what's up?
He stabbed a straw through one container and started slurping. Dante didn't waste any time.
Did you happen to mention our mission to anyone?
Noah's face flushed red. Candace couldn't help but shake her head at his stupidity.
How was I to know she'd go all psycho?
Noah protested.
You should know enough to keep your mouth shut about missions.
There was an edge to Dante's voice.
I'm sorry, okay?
Noah slumped in his seat, sulking. Candace glanced at Dante. She'd never admit it, but old Chicago had scared her. Even life on the streets hadn't prepared her for that nightmare, which explained Dante's darkness. Maybe too dark. Perhaps she should set her sights on one of their handlers instead. Mustafa, though. Definitely not skinny Radcliffe. Then again, Mustafa was pretty dark too, in a nefarious kind of way. Paying no mind to the racket happening at the other table, Candace and her teammates ate silently while they poked at their personal data pads.
So you think it's true?
Noah perked up again. Dante spooned soup into his mouth.
Is what true?
Our next mission is in space.
Candace and Dante exchanged looks.
Jeez, am I the only one who looks at the curriculum?
Noah waggled his eyebrows.
We're scheduled for spacesuit training Thursday this week.
Candace's stomach tightened. Space. She'd never even been on a shuttle. One wrong move up there and... She pushed the thought away, focusing instead on staying alive long enough to get there. After all, labor prison wasn't an option. And if the Enclave thought she would settle for being a honey trap, they were even dumber than the local human authorities. Chapter 12. Dante stepped into the torture room, his face set in cold indifference. Mustafa called this place the Corrective Training Center, but dressing up a slaughterhouse doesn't change the smell. Mustafa, all muscled up in his gold and black rent boy uniform, was waiting for him. So was the man-size X-Cross, where Mustafa liked to beat him with the laser whip. Man was a sadist, but Dante wasn't afraid. He could take whatever Calith's captain of the guard threw at him. Knowing what was coming, Dante started removing his jacket, but Mustafa raised a hand.
And don't bother,
he smiled.
Unless you simply feel like showing off your pecs.
Dante's guard went up instantly. He scanned the room a second time. Blue-white light cut through the room's darkness from recessed panels above, which cast cold illumination on the X-Cross and the other 2 pieces of supposed corrective training equipment. Nothing new there. So exactly what game was this?
No game this time, Dante.
Mustafa's voice echoed off the black padded walls. Jeez. It was like the man could read his mind. But no one had that kind of spirit power. He hoped.
I just want to talk.
So you're not going to punish me for...
Attempting to shoot me in the face?
Mustafa shook his head.
No, I'm not.
Why not?
Amusement lit up Mustafa's winter blue eyes.
You and your team completed the mission. The traitor?
Mustafa shrugged.
We would have terminated Sasha anyway for abandoning her mission.
Which made sense. And that thought should have bothered him. But it didn't.
Sasha called me a traitor.
The words escaped before he could stop them. Stupid. Never show weakness, especially in front of this guy.
So are you a traitor?
Dante measured his response.
Depends on your perspective, I suppose.
So deliciously vague. Very good, Dante.
The praise felt like poison, like a snake scoping out its next meal.
I don't understand how a guy like you can stand bowing and scraping to bloodsuckers.
Dante put on a sincere face. But really he just wanted to get a rise out of his handler, and he got it. Disgust transformed Mustafa's usually stoic face.
Don't you get it, boy? We'll always be bowing and scraping to someone. If not to the Felron, to a king or dictator. People like to be led.
His voice softened to a calm, almost warm edge.
As long as you give people the illusion of freedom.
Mustafa began circling him like a shark.
Look what humans have achieved under Felron guidance. We've torn holes in space itself, bent gravity to our will.
He stopped directly behind Dante.
And now, with Lord Caliph creating superhumans like you?
His voice dropped to a whisper.
Well, let's just hope that the Felron don't regret teaching us so much.
Dante couldn't help but tense. 1. Mustafa was way too close. 2. He almost sounded like he was promoting rebellion. This had to be a trick. Dante considered what he would do if Mustafa attacked him from behind.
You do know that I don't trust you.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't trust anybody. But you've learned that already, haven't you?
The truth of it settled in Dante's stomach like dry ice.
Your pain will fade, Dante. You'll have kids with Candace. Or Miranda. And your progeny will be even stronger than you. They will do what must be done.
You playing matchmaker now?
You can screw Aiden or anyone else for all I care. As long as you produce a child with either of our 2 female recruits.
Aiden? Dante didn't want to even guess what put that idea into the captain of the guard's head. Miranda wasn't his type either. Games. This man was always playing games with him. Dante turned around to face Mustafa.
What do you really want from me, besides kids?
Mustafa stared at him as if it was obvious, then said,
I want you to be my weapon.
Mustafa's eyes turned hungry.
The question is, what do you want?
To leave this place.
You already had your chance, and now you realize there is no place to escape to, or hide.
Cruelty twisted Mustafa's dark voice.
So tell me, Dante Ransom, what do you really want?
The answer rose from somewhere deep and dark.
To learn, get stronger. Payback.
Mustafa's smile was all ice and venom. Worse. Dante was certain that his smile was the same. Combat constructs, though challenging, aren't hard to beat. Maybe she could convince Noah to spar with her, though sparring with Dante would be a lot more fun. Which was stupid to think, of course. Noah obviously was a lot better with weapons than anyone in their group, including her. Yet the thought of swordplay with Dante made her grin. The combat constructs materialized from thin air with a sickening pop of yellow energy. Miranda's opponents had no face, 4 arms, and a nasty mint green sword in each hand. The 2 constructs came at her from opposite sides, swords whistling through the air. Non-lethal, yeah, but damn, they'd hurt if she were clumsy enough to get hit. Miranda dropped low as the first blade sliced through the space where her head had been. She slid beneath the second construct's legs, the polished floor cool against her skin. In one fluid motion, she sprang up, driving her sword through its back. The construct dissolved into a shower of pixels. Her remaining opponent nearly caught Miranda in the temple with a savage swing. Miranda bent backward, feeling the displacement of air across her face. Her counterstrike was perfect. a clean arc that separated the construct's head from its shoulders. Another burst of pixels, then silence. Harsh light flooded the room. Behind the two-way mirror, Dr. Harper and her colleagues observed her every move, their gazes cold and calculating. Dissection without a scalpel.
What the hell was that?
Harper's voice cut through the speakers. Miranda turned her back on the woman and headed to the rear wall to replace the sword on its rack. She grabbed her water jug before facing the mirror again.
Would you mind qualifying your question, Doctor? I did destroy all of the constructs.
Yes. And it took you twice as long as it should have. Get in here.
The mirror went black. Oh boy, more trouble now. She shouldn't have turned her back on Harper, but lately the woman had been getting under her skin. Resigned to the inevitable scolding, Miranda entered the observation room, wiping sweat from her neck with a gym towel. Harper hovered over the two doctors seated at the room's monitoring console. Her cold gaze swept over the doctors.
If you're not prepared to witness failure up close, get the hell out.
The doctors weren't stupid. They were doctors after all, and Dr. Harper was in charge of them all when it came to the Enclave, despite her expertise falling mostly in genetics and human biology. Great. Now she was alone again with Dr. Harpy. Option 1, be contrite and get berated. Option 2, punch the witch in her arrogant face. This surge of hostility surprised her. Yes, Harper was almost always cruel, but she still was the closest thing to a mother Miranda had ever known.
So what's the problem?
Harper's tone aimed for casual.
Still daydreaming about the waste?
Miranda recognized the bait for what it was. She'd played this game before. Harper hated not having her questions answered. The doctor's right hand twitched, and Miranda's cheek remembered past lessons. But something had changed. Instead of hitting her, Harper's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and almost gentle.
Believe it or not, Miranda,
she said.
I get it. Dante's handsome and tall with winter green eyes, and there's something that's sexy and dangerous about him.
This sudden shift in behavior made Miranda's skin crawl. Harper had never spoken to her like this. Like she was human instead of data points on a chart.
Miranda,
she continued, almost smiling.
There are now only 2 females left in your academy class. Men, including Dante, see women much like the Felron see humans. Weak, dependent, not as smart. We owe it to our sex to prove them all wrong.
Harper turned toward the door but said over her shoulder.
Think about it.
She would. She'd have to. That talk was so strange. Miranda breathed in deep and started to leave when a flicker of light caught her attention. In the corner of the room, a computer screen came to life, its text appearing unbidden. She stared at the words. Don't trust them, it read. Who would dare send such a message? More importantly, were they right? Chapter 13. There were no hollow screens on this time. Nothing but darkness and shadow filled Lord Calith's receiving room. Shrouded in darkness, Mustafa could feel the unseen gaze of his Felron lord, waiting for him in silent judgment as he stepped into the room and approached. Like always, Mustafa mentally counted his steps and stopped exactly 11 feet from where Calith sat on his gravity-defying dais. Mustafa lowered himself to one knee and bowed low. A spotlight pierced the darkness, revealing Calith perched on his gold filigree throne. The lord of the estate said nothing for what might seem an eternity, but in actuality was little more than 2 minutes. His saucer-sized, unblinking eyes radiated a quiet menace, as unsettling as the burnt wood stench that clung to him. However, it was the rumbling movement underneath Calith's robes that made Mustafa's gut tighten. The hidden tentacles shifted like serpents under silk.
Report.
The word carried both command and threat. Mustafa rose to his full 78 inches.
2 of the 3 academy teams successfully completed their mission.
Calith's lipless mouth pulled downward into a mockery of a frown. So Mustafa told him the truth.
One of the waste abandoned the mission and attacked another team.
But not your chosen one. The one you brought to me.
No, my lord. Dante and his team killed the traitor.
Movement beneath Calith's robes pulled at Mustafa's attention. Restless and agitated, Mustafa held perfectly still. After 11 years of service, this could be the moment the bloodsucker decided to end him, but it wasn't.
And the preparations for Enceladus.
Calith's elongated head tilted at an impossible angle.
On schedule, my lord. Transport ship's upgrades are nearly complete. Academy recruits begin zero-gravity training later this week.
Mustafa kept his voice steady. Showing fear of any kind would only hurry his demise.
Dr. Harper is also training her charge to be able to recognize and take the required samples.
A sound like wet stones grinding together emerged from Calith, what passed for pleasure or laughing among Felron kind, despite the scowl remaining fixed on his zombie-gray face.
And the waste.
The Felron's words came faster now.
He will be loyal to us now.
Mustafa gave a slight incline of his head.
It was only a matter of finding out what he truly desired, my lord.
And what does the waste creature desire?
Mustafa dared a smile.
Revenge.
Beneath Calith's robes, the tentacles went still. The psychotic eyes studied him for another eternal moment before Calith finally dismissed him with a wave of his hand. Mustafa backed away, counting 11 steps before turning. The spotlight died, plunging the room back into total darkness. Felrons could see in the dark. Well, at least that's what they wanted humans to think, though no one knew for sure. Only when the doors sealed behind him did Mustafa allow himself a real smile. The bloodsucker didn't need to know what kind of revenge Dante truly wanted, or against whom. Some weapons, after all, cut both ways. Chapter 14. Old Chicago. Waste population, 10,389. Current serf population, 4. In the distance, Dante could hear the rapid sound of gunfire rupturing an otherwise still, sunny afternoon. Multiple types of gunshots, a pause every few minutes, and then the firefight continued. This was Steel Serpent territory after all. Yet Owen and the Ravens were waltzing through the projects in broad daylight. For money, of course. Greed. Dante kept to the shadows of broken buildings, stepping over bodies that wore both serpent and raven colors. Enough blood had spilled to create abstract patterns across the crumbling concrete. What a waste. Owen's greed had turned the projects into a killing field. Hard to believe that a few months ago this was his life. Dante shrugged off those thoughts and focused on his mission. The nearest apartment building towered above the courtyard, its windows like empty eye sockets. Dante slipped inside, taking the stairs 2 at a time, until he reached the roof. The sniper never heard him coming. The man was lying prone, rifle scope trained on the scene playing out below. He spun around when Dante's boots scraped concrete. Too late. Dante ripped the rifle from his hands with a thought.
Owen said you were dead.
Marsh started to stand, but froze when he found himself staring down the barrel of Dante's pulse pistol.
How many? He hissed.
Huh?
Dante pressed the pistol closer.
How many snipers?
Just me.
Turn around.
Marsh hesitated, then did what he was told. Dante whacked him on the back of the head. Hard enough to drop him, but not enough to kill. More mercy than Owen would have shown him. Dante looked over the ledge. Yep, everyone was there. Dante left Marsh where he had fallen and took the stairs back down. Time to finish this. Dante ghosted through the building's shadows until he reached the edge of the courtyard. An old grav truck dominated the space, its rusted frame propped up by dying anti-grav panels. Kip and Spike, both lower-level Raven lieutenants, lounged against the truck, pulse rifles ready, playing at being tough soldiers. Owen, Marcus, and Mila stood opposite Mustafa. Owen's voice carried across the dead zone between buildings.
Sure brave of you coming to Waste City all by your lonesome, son.
Mustafa glanced casually at the combat drone on his right.
I wouldn't exactly say that I'm alone.
He tossed a jingling bag that landed between them. Owen grabbed Mila by the arm and shoved her forward.
Don't just stand there, stupid. Pick it up.
Mila shot Owen a look but retrieved the small bag and hustled back to him, keeping her eyes on Mustafa all the way. Owen snatched the bag from her, opened it, then grinned as he looked back up.
So, what do you want for this donation?
Oh, nothing much. I just want you to kill Dante Ransom.
A pulse rifle blast echoed across the courtyard as Dante's shot caught Spike in the side of his neck. Kip dove behind the truck before Spike even hit the ground.
Owen, you said Dante was dead.
Owen yanked his pistol from his side holster, fear warring with determination on his face.
He will be.
Mila and Marcus drew their own weapons, scanning frantically for a target they couldn't see. Fools. And to think he once considered these people friends. A smoke grenade dropped, spinning in front of them, releasing thick coils of green-gray smoke. Thermal shades now on, Dante had no trouble putting 3 pulse rounds into Kip. The first 2 punched through his chest, the third caught him just under the jaw. Kip's body hit the ground with a wet thud. And Owen, he, Mila, and Marcus were coughing up smoke and firing blind. Mustafa, smart guy that he is, made himself scarce.
Stop firing, you idiots!
Owen shouted. This scene was almost comical. The smoke was already beginning to dissipate as Dante approached his former gang captains. Owen's face was now chalk-white despite him laughing.
This some kind of setup, I suppose, Dante?
I learned from you, ex-friend.
Owen coughed one more time, then let out a glob of spit in Dante's direction.
Well, don't you look nice and pretty in your fancy rent boy outfit?
Makes it easier to kill you.
Owen shrugged.
It was just business, Dante.
That and your lust for power.
That too, man. That too.
Owen and Marcus raised their weapons at the same time. A thought from Dante sent the weapons spinning away. Owen's laughter turned manic.
Shit, that's some pretty fancy stuff you've learned, old friend.
He raised his hands.
Okay, you got me. I give up.
Not what I want to hear.
Dante's pistol barked, and Marcus spun from the impact, blood spraying as he dropped to the ground. Now Owen really did look scared, and Dante felt nothing. Nothing but regret.
Come on, Dante, man. Just tell me what you want.
Owen jerked a thumb at Mila.
Her? You can have her. She's only so-so in bed anyway.
The only thing I want right now.
Dante squeezed the trigger, and Owen's face disappeared in a red mist of blood and brain matter. His body flopped onto the dirt like discarded trash.
I'm sorry, Dante.
Mila's tears cut clean tracks through the grime on her face.
I didn't know Owen was going to betray you.
But you stayed with him even after he did.
Mila, visibly shaking, continued backing away.
I was scared. I'm not strong enough to go out on my own.
He understood. Survival in old Chicago meant choosing the lesser evil.
Look at you.
Mila wiped away her tears with a rough hand.
Well-fed, well-dressed. And I'm still here, suffering. You never came back for us, Dante.
Dante stared at her, finger tight on the trigger. Then something shifted inside him. Maybe it was empathy. Maybe it was weakness. He lowered his pistol.
Just go,
he told her, then turned toward the footsteps coming in behind him. Mustafa materialized from the whispers of smoke. Candace and Noah at his heels.
Got what you wanted.
Yeah, he had. But Mustafa had gotten what he wanted too. His hooks buried deep in Dante's soul. He thought Candace was going to hug him, but she raised her pistol at him instead, and fired. Dante spun around, power gathering, but the bullet wasn't meant for him. Mila crumpled to the dirt, her own weapon falling from lifeless fingers. She'd been seconds from putting a round through his back. Candace's perfect lips lifted into a knowing smile.
Men, you're so delightfully gullible.
That's sexist,
Noah protested.
Yeah.
Dante felt himself almost smiling despite everything.
But thanks for the save.
Let's go, ghosts.
Mustafa's grin promised more violence to come.
Got a new mission for you. Ever been to Saturn before?
No. He hadn't. Never killed a bloodsucker before either. Guess anything was possible these days. Dante caught the calculating look in Mustafa's bright eyes and kept those thoughts to himself.